Still looking at the matter of the Nigerian economy, there's still another sensitive matter which has to do with our debt burden. The finance minister came out recently to say that we do not need debt relief, that we are meeting up our obligation. And so to speak. But when the next president comes on board, how would you like for him to address the matter of our debt burden?
To address the matter of what? Sorry, I didn't get that last part.
Address the matter of our debt burden.
We don't have a debt burden. We simply have a very poor fiscal framework. Now, the first thing you do as a government, now let me talk about whoever becomes president, is to say exactly how much do I need to borrow? And this is what we'll call PSBR. So there's a public sector borrowing requirement. You've got to determine what that is. And this public sector borrowing requirement must be such that would add to the Nigerian economy. It's not to go pay salaries. It must be productive. That's one. But before you even determine what you want to borrow, you must ask yourself, exactly what do I have in my bank? I don't know whether you recall that the Minister of Finance herself said, oh, we have suddenly discovered that we have 33 trillion naira locked away in what is called MOFI, that is the Ministry of Finance Incorporated. This is an entity that houses a lot of the government assets. And she also said that the huge Nigerian Railway Corporation is valued at 20 million naira only. So what I would say before we start talking about debt burden is to ask, what exactly do we have in our bank? What are our assets? I was once involved in a case concerning the abandoned federal government secretariat in Ikoyi. It's been abandoned for the last 40 years. The value of that building is about 140 billion. Now, if that thing was sold and not left standing empty, it would fix the east-west road. So we need to look in, and I also saw a report from the Federal Ministry of Justice. It was trying to harmonize all abandoned landed property in Nigeria owned by the federal government. And if I recall correctly, the value was put at something like 20 trillion. So we have 20 trillion coming out of abandoned land of the federal government. We have 33 trillion being stated by the Minister of Finance. That is 53 trillion. Our current budget is 22 trillion. There's a deficit of 7 trillion. So if you put all this together and do all the calculations, you find that we're actually in surplus. But the problem is no one is looking at these issues. That's the problem. So I would expect a Nigerian president to be very, very, very savvy on finances. Look inwards. It's just like a household. The first thing you do before you borrow money to pay school fees is to ask exactly what do I have in my bank. If I have enough money to pay school fees, why should I go and borrow? So I need to see an audit of federal government's finances to determine whether we actually need to borrow anything. I don't think we need to borrow anything. I need to see a president grow our GDP at double digits, cut our lending rates to single digits, and that will spur employment and jobs and create wealth. That's what I need to see a Nigerian president do in 2023.
And you also proffer a solution, that is tied to Nigeria's economy, this time around in the legal sector, where you are a major stakeholder in. You're talking about the need to introduce an administration of civil justice bill. We have the criminal justice element, and now you're talking about the civil justice element, which you say will help to hasten proceedings in court as against the delays that the regular courts are fraught with.
Yeah, okay. You are touching a micro issue in a macro problem. The macro problem is that we have complete legal failure in Nigeria. It takes a case filed at the High Court, 15 years to get to the Supreme Court. So who's likely to invest in this sort of country where the laws are unstable, sanctity of contract is unclear? So what I was saying there is that the president of Nigeria next year needs to dismantle the legal and judicial systems and create a new system that is efficient and functional and can meet the interests of not just poor people, but people who want to invest money. So I would be dismantling the entire legal and judicial system and creating and erecting a new, fresh one. And all those laws I have referred to in the report that will be released would be important in achieving the process that I have identified. If you have legal failure, no one's going to come here. If your institutions don't work, if you have regulatory failure, then it's unlikely that people want to come to invest. Another point I need to point out, just going back to the issue you raised about our so-called debt burden. I have worked in Apapa for 40 years. I have never seen a more disunited place like Apapa. All the roads don't work, yet the Customs Controller General says that Apapa ports can give the federal government 20 billion naira every day. That comes to about 7.6 trillion a year. So why isn't the federal government working on it? That is an area I would expect any of the candidates to absolutely look into. Apapa ports will bring this government massive revenue. So it's an area that I would be expecting a candidate to really address very seriously. Because if you see, I've mentioned 33 trillion from the Minister of Finance. I've talked about the abandoned landed properties across Nigeria by the report of the Federal Ministry of Justice. I have just referred to the Apapa ports and the potential to bring in revenue. So we are not a poor country. It is that we don't manage our resources, and therefore we look as if we don't have resources.
All right, we need to quickly bring in this question before we let you go, Dr. Agbakoba. The issue of corruption, lack of transparency, and accountability. It's been a major issue. And I want you to just perhaps talk to us on what you would expect when the next president comes in 2023. A lot of Nigerians have been speaking to the matter of addressing corruption and accountability.
Yeah, I think the starting point again would be to recall what I just said about legal failure. So if you deal with legal failure, that will help the process. Then the second thing will be to identify exactly what institution can do what. Right now, we have the EFCC as Nigeria's premier anti-corruption agency. I think the EFCC is saddled with too many responsibilities. It's investigating crime, it's prosecuting crime, and it's trying to recover assets. Three things in one. The EFCC doesn't have the capability to do all these three jobs. And I challenge anyone to tell me where in the world you have any EFCC doing three things in one. So I will recommend to any Nigerian president next year to restrict the role of the EFCC to investigation, and then to create an efficient state prosecution service outside of the Ministry of Justice. Just like you have in the UK, you have the Crown Prosecution Service. Now, if you have efficient anti-corruption agencies, then people will be afraid to be involved in corrupt practices. But right now, no one's afraid.
All right.
Yeah, okay.
We have run out of time, but we need to end the conversation here now. But we must thank you, Senior Advocate of Nigeria and former President of the Nigeria Bar Association, Dr. Olisa Agbakoba, for your time on the program.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.